warm welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. My name is Tamás Beretsky, and I'm here today together with Ellen de Waal from EHA and the communications work packages of the Harmony Alliance, and with Jan Geisler, who's the lead of the patient cluster within the Harmony Alliance that covers both Harmony and Harmony Plus. Our topic for today is, and let me share my slides so that I can walk you through that. Our topic for today is patients in science, and in particular, the participation and involvement of the patient cluster and of patient experts within Harmony in research work, in the research proposals and that are submitted to the Harmony platform, and also in the life cycle of these research proposals, if you like. Today's webinar is recorded, and it will then be uploaded to the Harmony website. And Ellen will kindly take care of that, so that you can always go back to this webinar and use it as a reference. We use the webinar format today, which means that we would like to go through the presentations. They are short, and then have time for questions and answers at the end of today's meeting. Some basic ground rules, even though I think that after 2.5, 3 years of working online, we don't really need to go into much detail with this. Please observe the time, which we will also try to do. If there are any topics, any issues that you think are interesting, but maybe not relevant, so we call them jellyfish moments, then we will park them for later conversation and for follow-up. Obviously, the patient cluster leadership and also the patient cluster members are here for you to answer your questions or to get involved. Please mute your mic and try to exclude external noises. In my case, this might be difficult because my dog is quite excited today. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, then please use either the questions and answers box or the chat box. We will be monitoring both. And if you have any technical issues or difficulties, then please send a direct message to me in the chat box. If you would like to make a comment, then please feel free to raise your hand, and then we will give you the floor towards the end of the webinar. The same for questions if you have any. And of course, you're very welcome to use the chat box. You can also share links in the chat box if you think that that's relevant for the meeting. So after this short welcome, Ellen will talk about the positioning of the Harmony Harmony Alliance patient cluster, and she will also bring you a couple of examples about joint communication activities within the Harmony Alliance with the involvement of the patients. Then we will listen to Jan Geisler, who will talk about the importance of patient involvement in research and development, and not just the importance, because I mean that this webinar exists and that you are here already shows that this is an important topic, but he will also talk about why it makes sense to work with patients in research and also then later in development. And then I will talk to you about the standard operating procedure of the Harmony Alliance that discusses patient involvement. I will explain to you how the standard operating procedure looks like, what it contains, and what's the procedure that's associated with the standard operating procedure. And then finally, and last but not least, we will have a questions and answers session should you have any questions or any comments to make. Ellen, would you like to take over from here, or do you want me to explain what the patient cluster entails?
Yes, you first, and then I'll follow you.
Okay. So the Harmony Alliance, the Harmony and Harmony Plus projects are quite unique in that when the consortium was first designed back 6-7 years ago, it was already designed or set up with full patient involvement in mind, meaning that through a host organization, through a hub organization, which is LeucaNet, the Leukemia Advocates Network, these patient organizations, so LeucaNet and the other 8, have been actively involved in the work of Harmony as full consortium partners. You can see the logos of these organizations. Each of them cover one or even several of the hematologic malignancies that are covered by the Harmony Alliance. Now, the patient cluster have, as I said from the beginning, been consistently involved in the definition of outcomes, and you could hear and read about this quite much in the course of getting ready for the midterm review of Harmony Plus recently, last Friday. But also previously when core outcome sets were defined for the Harmony project a couple of years ago with a relevant publication that emerged from this exercise, and there will be more coming. But also the patient cluster and the patient communities behind the patient cluster have been involved in designing research projects and also providing information to patients. The essential task of the patient cluster is making sure that there's a reliable bidirectional flow of information within but also outside of the Harmony Alliance. So we make sure that you learn about, if you're interested, if you care about this, then you can learn about the needs, asks, and state of play of the patient organizations, and vice versa. The patient cluster also keeps the patient organizations informed and involved, motivates them for even further involvement, and helps them put together research proposals for the Harmony platform. And as I've already mentioned this in the beginning, this is the first project within IMI, or now IHI, so the first larger research project where the patient community really sits at the table as a full-fledged partner, as equal partners to researchers, the industry, and the regulators. So I think that this is really a tremendous achievement in which we take a lot of pride. And in order to make sure that this works in an even smoother way and in a reliable way, the patient cluster and the work packages associated with the patient cluster had this task last year to develop a standard operating procedure for how to involve patients. And that's actually our topic for today. Right, and before we get to Jan's presentation, it's you, Ellen. So I stop sharing and you can share your slides.
Perfect. So hello, everybody. I have a quick peek who's already there, because I'm aware that many of you, we know each other. But together with Jan and Thomas, we thought it would be good to just, look back a couple of years, how it all started. And also, following up on what Thomas just said. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Yeah, there it is. We took it very seriously. I had the good fortune to be hired by EHA and to also be able to start in 2017, just after Harmony was launched externally. And of course, we needed to start with everything with respect to communication activities, but really, really right from the start, not that it was just an important part of the contract and the first time that patients were involved in this way. The patients within our multi-stakeholder community are still a very special group. And if we have the chance to show how Harmony has organized it and what Harmony is going to do with this new situation. Yes, we really are very much aware of finding the best ways to tell that to the outside world. So the first thing, of course, which we started to do is take the name patient cluster very seriously. If you have over the years saw communications about the patients involved in Harmony, we usually literally name them always in a uniform and consistent way. We always talk about the Harmony patient cluster. So we made sure that at the website and whatever update we were making, that pages related to the patient cluster were easy to be found. Within Harmony, we have a patient page, and within Harmony Plus, we have a patient page. And this is just explaining who the patient partners are and how they are organized within the Harmony Alliance. So these are pages which we use especially for the professional audiences. And what you see here on the left, also from the very beginning, next and parallel to all the other voices of Harmony, the patient voice was very well channeled. We had the good fortune to work together with the people you know also already very good. And especially for me as a communicator, it is a different topic to address patients involved in a very large consortium as Harmony, but also to address what the objectives are. So also, still in our own community, we found it very much important to include in the programming, together with the other work packages and the project management organization, to include the patient voice. Not only the patient voice, but just continue to repeat the position of the patient cluster within the Harmony Alliance. So here you see some examples, of course, which you already know. And I also vividly remember a really nice setup brainstorm in The Hague to talk at the very beginning or halfway down about the never-ending challenge, how to organize that. At that same time, we are in about 2018, we thought about something else, which we'll show you later. The last part about positioning the Harmony cluster. Externally, we also thought it was very important not only to be proud on the fact that we had this patient cluster, but also make it an integral part of our message to the outside world, who we are, how we are organized, and what this type of partners will contribute to Harmony Alliance as a whole. So on the left, maybe you already saw it over the years, our YouTube page and in the individual messages. We were lucky to be able to also make video messages with people from our patient organizations, apart from all the other communicators or non-communicators, but who were willing to have an ambassador role in our messaging. And it is always an excellent choice to be able to include patient voices in large conferences such as EHA or ASH. And it's also a great acknowledgement that also IMI helps us to show and point out this unique situation and this promising situation. So on the right below, you see Jan, who is part of the Impact webinar series of IHI. So this was some examples for the external communication activities. So back to what did we do together? Because the main activities, communication and dissemination activities, are of course for all professional audiences within the hematology field. However, there are two pathways to address patients. So one of those pathways was, of course, as you know very well, the Delphi survey activities, collaborated closely with all the people and the dedicated team of work packages 2 of both Harmony and Harmony Plus. So as a communication team, we also reached out to our connections at the patient organizations to help us develop the right, it is text, but the right text to explain this difficult topic, because maybe what I forgot to mention in the beginning, it is quite a tough topic to bring across to patients. And this is still more on the semi-professional level. So the Delphi surveys are a technical instrument, but in the end, patient input was very much important to explain why we do this. And the next step is the communities of the patient organizations were able to pick up our material and hopefully reach out more communities over Europe. So this was an example of the help and and the activities we did together. And then 2 years or 2.5 years ago, we found that the time was there to make it a step further. We did not really leave the concept of hematology, but we thought make it a little bit easier for patients or general audience to understand what we're talking about. So we claimed more or less the big data for blood cancer concept or verb or hashtag, as you can see here, as a creative umbrella concept to wrap better our information targeted at patients and their family. In the meantime, together with the patient community and the patient cluster representative, we made some video animations because, you know, we found we needed to find more ways to explain. So not only people's messages, not only great text to read, but also maybe as a drawing. I hope once over the years you saw these videos. They are a different style where to bring across what it is about. And then last year, as I mentioned earlier, our creative concept and more maybe accessible or understandable concept was brought to life. Last year, we chose to fully target our information towards patients and their families together with the big data for, together with the Blood Cancer Awareness Month. During that whole month, various groups or communities within the blood cancer and hematology have their own individual awareness day. So it was for us an excellent method actually to link our relatively difficult topic with these awareness activities. So we choose the whole month of September to trigger people to maybe realize there's more to blood cancer research. And of course, there's a lot of discussion about data and health data, but we wanted to keep it simple. Okay, we have big data, we have our research, we have harmony, we have people who are working together, and we hope in the future it will be more tangible for you to what this will lead. So what you see here are all kinds of screenshots which we developed last year. We had a lot of information made together with the individual patient organizations, and we really hope this was the foundation to use everything again this year for a second round of Big Data for Blood Cancer campaign. Because last year we ended September by launching the first Big Data for Blood Cancer Awareness Day. I realize it's a long word, but it is another, I wouldn't say try, but another outreach activity where we relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but at affordable cost, hope by means of social media and communities of the patient organizations reach out to people and again focus on big data in blood cancer research. So to wrap up this explanation, I hope it refreshed your mind as well, apart from our other Harmony communication activities, what we do, especially for patients and their family, and how we wrap it and try to make it clear. And if you have any idea how we can make it even more understandable, please do not hesitate to send a message, mail me, call me, and help us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks a lot. And with this, I would like to ask Jan to talk about patient involvement in general and why we believe that it's a powerful tool, not just in Harmony, but also in general in research and in pharmaceutical research and development.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much, Tamás, and also Alan for outlining the activities of Harmony in the area of patient involvement. I'd, as Tamás said, now like to take a bit of a step back and say, so how does patient involvement in R&D work? Because we sometimes hear that or get the question is whether patients can really deal with the complexity of research or can really be involved in research programs, and what the contribution of the patient community can actually be like when this is being done. So I'm going to present to you a bit about the why and the how, and what has been happening in the past 20, 30 years in the area of patient engagement, just to give you a bit of a flavor that in the end, all essential ingredients are there. They just need to be used to cook a good dish, which in the end is what we're all trying to accomplish. So when we talk about patient involvement, in a more methodological way, of course, there are different depth of involvement and systematic inclusion with consulting, decision-making, co-creation of medicines research and development. There are, of course, different levels. You see non-participation, you see tokenism, you see citizen control. You can see more or less different levels here. And whether patients are just involved as subjects or they're being informed about what research is being done, they're really being consulted, whether they're being partners, or in the end, if it's citizen-controlled research, there might be different depths of involvement, and also at the same time, of course, different knowledge, levels of knowledge that the patient community needs to engage on that. And when I started about 20 years ago, I would say being informed about research was in cancer probably one of the highest things we could actually get, while the HIV community was much further, and they really had taken the baton of taking research forward and also being very expressed and clear about what is important to them. So you can see the different levels here. That's Einstein's ladder of participation, which represents a model for that. But the consistent use of methodologies and guidelines is really important, and all the methodologies and guidelines are there today. So why do we do that? In the end, we're all striving to improve health outcomes and to have more sustainable healthcare. Because if we don't do that, I mean, research and development and therapeutic development is just for the sake of it, if it doesn't improve health outcomes or make healthcare more sustainable. So what, of course, patient involvement tries to do to really focus research on what patients need and what patients want. And in the end, there are benefits for everyone if we do that, because there are benefits for the society as such, because you have a more healthy population, you're avoiding waste of money and really target interventions to the true needs of society and the people that are affected and living with a certain condition. There's direct benefits for the patients, and of course, there's benefits for the state. Just talking about the waste of resources, but also very efficient use of scarce healthcare resources in terms of access, in terms of care, in terms of therapies, and so on. There are benefits for industry too, because of course, a lot of money is being put into research and clinical trials and product development and regulatory processes and so on. And in the end, it's quite expensive if you spend between 400 million, 1.5 billion on therapeutic development in a specific therapeutic area. In the end, it doesn't ever get into patients just because it fails on either the intended outcomes or what patients really need, or what, let's say, a society is willing to pay. And of course, it improves transparency, because patients are really interested that knowledge spreads, whether something works or doesn't work. And there are measurable key performance indicators to measure each of that. We didn't have these kind of measurements years ago, but today they are there. So simple basics around patient involvement. I mean, probably I don't need to cover the text, but if you just look at the image on the right, we're all in the same boat. It's not that any stakeholder can do that alone. Collaboration is key, and I think we're living and breathing that with a project like Harmony, and that's why the whole IHI program has been set up to get on a pre-competitive basis, get people together from academia, from clinics, from industry, from patient organizations, from NGOs, from regulators, to solve and tackle issues where no party alone can actually do that. And over the past years, the patients have undergone significant efforts to actually become real partners of researchers and not just the consumers of medicine. So if you just put yourself into our shoes, why are we patient advocates? We really want to make a difference for patients. And probably nobody has such a genuine interest in that than we as patients. So we're trying to support, of course, patients and their families. That's what business people would call our core business. We're trying to help clinicians to provide the best possible services to their patients, and also to avert bad and outdated practice. And we know that not everybody is fully up to speed what has happened in the past years. And given the complexity in cancer and hematology, it is very, very important to make sure the best possible services are being provided to patients. Of course, we're trying to influence regulators and payers because they're taking decisions for society in terms of what we can afford, and for patients to protect their safety, and also make sure that efficacy and clinical effectiveness is ensured. So we want to make them or help them to ensure that the decisions they take are based on patient preferences, true unmet needs. And that's not always the case if we're not involved. We're trying to tell policymakers to do policy for patients, and we've been engaging on the EU and Brussels level in the past 20 years in cancer to really help when things like the Clinical Trials Directive or regulation, or data protection regulation, or information to patients, or information about medicinal products are being revised, or now at the moment the pharmaceutical legislation on the EU level. We're trying to be part of that to make sure that this really delivers to the patient needs. And of course, education has been a huge bit, because there were not so many patients that really understood research about 20 years ago. Through the European Patients Academy and other activities, we've really made a difference to get more and more highly trained patient advocates that can be partners in research, in clinical trials, and in projects like IMI Harmony or the Harmony Alliance. So in the end, this is an evolution over many years, and it can actually, it's not a new fashion, and it's not a fashion. It doesn't go away. It has started with the HIV movement 1992 or somewhere around that, where there was quite a lot of unrest in the community that patients should be part of decision making in terms of access, availability, and the collaboration of different competitors. And I could spend 20 minutes on that kind of evolution, but you see that over the years, with the EMA in 2005 starting patient involvement, with the FDA having patient representatives in different committees, with the foundation of patient-focused medicine development and EU Party around 2012 to 2015, with the uptake in DIA and increasing activity also in the whole portfolio of IMI and IHI projects, and also guidances provided by the National Institute for Clinical Excellence in the UK and so on. There's been a whole set of guidances, frameworks, tools, and so on being developed to actually make sure that patient involvement moves from theory to reality. But the real uptake has probably started sometimes around 2019, 2020, when it was really in everyone's heads and was getting into the industry plans and academic plans and regulatory plans to move from tokenistic patient involvement into something that really has an influence on direction. And the black line is actually where we are. So we're still not at the end. We're moving now from applying all these methodologies into patient involvement. And just to give you a practical insight, that's a roadmap that we have published a couple of years ago, and it's been used all across the EU Party training material. This is actually a clinical trial development roadmap. So from setting research priorities, the orange bit is actually designing a clinical study. The blue area is then conducting the study and running it. And then if that's a phase 3 trial or so, then the last bit is about market authorization and of course also post-approval activities and dissemination of research results. In all these different points, again, I could speak for long about that, are concrete things that are happening. This is not something that is theory. I mean, Tamas could talk a lot about what the HIV community has been doing, and we in cancer have learned a lot from the community in terms of patient advocacy. And if I just take the example of me as being a CML patient advocate, within our community, we have quite a number of very well-trained patient advocates, and we have been involved in trial design. We have been involved in developing the ERTC and HM Pro instruments. We have been involved in doing totally different informed consents or informed consent documents that patients can understand. I sit on an ethics committee where looking at studies on a 4-weekly basis, and I'm part of the ethics panel here in Bavaria. We sit on trial steering committees. I'm at the moment on 2 trial steering committees in the area of CML. We've been presenting at investigator meetings about our perspective on trial design and probably potential amendments to the protocol. We've been sitting on data safety monitoring committees to look at safety data and look at new risk assessments that we needed to take to decide on amendment of protocol, stop of study, or just moving on as it is. And a number of us have been involved in EMA scientific meetings to actually advise on interpreting the data. So you can see a lot of activities there, and of course HTA. So that's not really something new. And of course, the methodologies, the instruments are different because every community uses different tool sets to actually work with researchers. But you can see a couple of here from focus group, over community advisory boards, over, let's say, being expert advisors, having work groups, and so on. We have implemented practical instruments and used them over years to make sure that we are very effective in terms of providing input there. What is very important is that the impact is on the left side. So on the design side, and when the design of a study is being done, while current patient involvement is often on the right side, we're not recruiting, what can we do? Or here's the result of the study, can somebody transport it and communicate it? And can we do a lay-friendly summary? But the big impact in terms of, are we researching on the right things? Are we looking at the right endpoints? Are we using the right instruments to measure meaningful quality of life? That's all on the left side. And very often we hear, but that's too late actually to decide that. And if you just take the same roadmap, but broaden it over a whole product development life cycle from preclinical over clinical or late clinical to post-approval, what is really important for us, if you see those dotted lines here, these are the decision points. So the decision for phase 1, decision for 2A, the decision for phase 3, we want to be involved left of that. And what often happens, we're involved right of that. So when decisions have been taken, we're being asked and we say, can we do this or that? Then we're being told, well, that's a bit late now. So that is really important, having these decision points and having a plan. And sometimes people say, but I can't get that patient advocate, they don't have time. Well, I mean, usually you plan months before to have a clinician being on those advisory boards. Why can't we also talk weeks before to have an expert patient on that advisory board? Because they're also quite busy people. So that's why it needs an engagement plan and not just ad hoc involvement. The EMA has actually picked patient involvement up since 2005. They have a consistent structure of approved patient experts. They have a list of a couple of hundred patient experts that they invite depending on indication area and product. And they have patient advocates, and you can see the different committees from orphan medicinal products, pediatric, the CHMP, advanced therapies, and so on. And you can see these little blue things. Those are all patient advocates, up to having patient representatives on the EMA management board with full decision rights or voting rights. So from that perspective, you can see that the EMA has adopted quite a broad concept on that. Of course, FDA has similar things. They're quite well advanced. They are currently also developing guidances on patient experience data, something that we're still missing from the EMA. So they're providing guidance on how companies can safely develop like patient preference data, pro data, and so on, that can then be taken into account in regulatory decisions when FDA takes decisions. And so that's why it's important to know these codes, know the guidances, and probably also important to know the EU PADI codes, which we've developed in the EU PADI program. for guiding patient involvement in industry R&D, in HTA body decisions, and regulatory processes and ethics committees. And there are also additional codes, of course, from the pharmaceutical industry, from FPR, or on the national level, like from ABPI, or codes that the patient community has written from EPF or EURORDIS on patient involvement and on the go and no-go areas of patient engagement. So with that, I hope that gives you a bit of a flavor that all the essential ingredients are there on patient engagement. We just need to make use of that. And with that, I'm passing on to Tamas.
Thank you, Jan. And I will continue, as you could see a glimpse of that with the standard operating procedures in the Harmony Alliance on patient involvement, and how we propose to do that. Not just propose, this is actually a required deliverable of the Harmony Plus project, and it applies to all research proposals that that are submitted to the Harmony platform. The standard operating procedure is not a very complicated thing, and we've tried to design this in a very straightforward and easy to use, easy to follow manner. The official title is Standard Operating Procedure for Engaging Participation of Consulting and Informing the Patient Organizations and Patients in Research Projects of RA Package 2 and Harmony Plus. And essentially what you find in the standard operating procedures is a description of the relevance and use of patient involvement in medicines research and development, or biomedical research and development, very similar to what Jan has just explained to you. Also, there's a description of the procedure of involvement, so how it is supposed to happen throughout the entire research proposal lifecycle. So not just the submission, but also as it is being conducted, analyzed, and then as the results are published. It also explains the roles of the different stakeholders for your convenience, so that you see who does what. And last but not least, it also includes 2 additional standard operating procedures. At the end of the document, you will find the SOP on submitting research proposals, and also the official research proposal form that we all are supposed to use when submitting research proposals to the Harmony platform. In order to have everything in one package, that's also part of the document. For those who are part of the Harmony consortium or Harmony Alliance and have access to the internal document repository, you can download this standard operating procedure from there. And I will show you in a second the simplified version and description of the SOP, which will also be available on the website, or maybe it has already been uploaded by Ellen. I'm not quite sure, but that's going to be there shortly. This is what the procedure or the standard operating procedure, sorry, entails. It discusses the development of the research idea or the project proposal as the first step. The next step is the submission of this research proposal to Harmony. The third step is about the implementation of the research project. The fourth step is analyzing the results. And last but not least, also the dissemination of results is part of this process. So, for example, publications or even any shape or form of communication about the results of a project proposal are also included here. For your convenience, I have broken this out in terms of actual steps. These are also described in detail in the SOP. and here, what the SOP envisages is consistent involvement of the patient representatives from within the patient cluster in every single step of this process. So we argue that the patient organization for the given hematologic malignancy should be involved in the definition of the research question with the consultation right. So we acknowledge that the patients should not have the ultimate decision right about what you would like to research on, except if the research proposal comes from the patient organization, and that's being done. These proposals are being developed as we speak. However, the consultation right we see is essential and justified. Also, we in the patient cluster, so Jan, myself, also Eglis Gonzalez, who's working with us on these in this project, will make sure that that this contact is there, is alive, and is working, and that there's this bidirectional information flow that we were mentioning in the beginning. And we also argue that thus the project proposal should be developed together with the relevant patient organizations and the patient experts coming from these patient organizations within the patient cluster. Now, when it comes to the submission to the Harmony platform, this happens with the use of the research proposal research project proposal form. That is, as I've mentioned, part of the standard operating procedure. For your reference, it's also available separately, of course, but if you I mean, for quick and easy reference, you can find it there at the end of the SOP, and also, which is something that's been done quite regularly and consistently so far, is that the research project proposal form is reviewed and assessed by the patient organizations if there's sufficient time for them to do so, which means that obviously it becomes much easier and faster if the patient organizations are involved in the development of the research idea and the development of the project proposal. What we see more often happening is that the patient organizations get the already developed research proposal for review, which is also fine. Obviously, the earlier the better, as you could hear it from Jan as well. During the implementation phase, we acknowledge that patient involvement does not really make so much sense when the data are being crunched by the platform, and that's more like IT expertise that's needed there, and statistical knowledge. And while some of this knowledge is available in the patient organizations, we are far from being able to say that that's where our expertise is. Therefore, it makes more sense not to involve patients very actively at this stage. However, when it comes to the analysis of the results, it does make sense to ask the patients as well about how they see, how they value, how they weight these results, and what is their interpretation, what is their reading of what the results are once the data are given back, once the results are given back by the platform. And last but not least, in the dissemination of results, we argue very strongly for the use and involvement of patient authors, not just because it's a matter of pride, it is, but that's not the key aspect. Also, increasingly we find that in scientific journals, you simply have much better chances for getting published with patient involvement if you can prove that there is at least one or maybe several patient authors involved in an article, or if you can prove that patient reviewers were involved in the development of the article. And last but not least, if there's a lay language summary attached to your research paper that was co-developed with with representatives of the patient community, these factors will improve your chances for getting published. And also they are increasingly being required by scientific journals, even big ones like the BMJ or any journal by Frontiers, the publishing house. So while we have already made a lot of progress in terms of patient involvement within the Harmony Alliance, there's still a lot that remains to be done. And this is why we also wanted to have this webinar. And then we hope to develop a discussion, a conversation on the basis of this webinar as we go forward with the rest of Harmony and Harmony Plus, because we believe that, that there's still a lot of room for improvement. First of all, in terms of the acknowledgement of the patient community's contributions, we believe that a lot more could be done. And we also try to do this from our own sides by scaling up capacities. If you look at the composition of the patient cluster, we have added several scientists, I mean, real ones, not just like me, who's a social scientist, so I maybe don't count, but we have microbiologists, biologists, people who have been engaged in biomedical research, in pharmaceutical research and development for years, in order to strengthen our capacity to be involved, and for you to make it easier to handle these contributions. There's a couple of asks and requests that the patient community has been consistently repeating, such as quality of life data should be included and analyzed in the research proposals. There's still, even though things are moving now, and that's a source of great joy and satisfaction. However, there's still a lot more that needs to be done in terms of including quality of life data. And these data can also be sourced from the patient community, as in some hematologic malignancies, it's already been happening, but still there's a lot more room for improvement. Early involvement, I will not repeat this again, as it was already explained by Jan. This continuous consultation with the patients is still not always established. So again, something where we need to do more together in order to get there, in order to reflect the spirit of the standard operating procedure as well, but also the spirit of Harmony in general. The results sharing, explanation, dissemination of the results would be essential also for the patient constituencies, for the patient organizations to understand clearly what's going on, what the results are. And as I've already mentioned, patient authorship would tremendously help, not just the visibility and the communication aspect of the aspects of the project, but also its credibility and its uptake by the patient communities. Obviously, the patient communities are much more enthusiastic about something that they have co-authored, or at least one or two representatives of them have co-authored, than when they get something dropped into their mailboxes, which they see then for the first time. As I've already mentioned, the patient cluster and also other patient organizations that are maybe not part or not yet part of the patient cluster have done a tremendous amount of work and capacity development, which is last but not least, one of the biggest achievements of Harmony as a project and Harmony Plus, so the Harmony Alliance, that it has allowed this capacity building work to happen. And that's something that we find tremendously important. But once this capacity building and development is there, we should also reap the benefits of that, especially within the Harmony project. And then another aspect that the patient cluster is responsible for anyway, hence this webinar as well, we need to strengthen this flow of communication, interactions, joint work, collaboration across all stakeholder groups, but we will get there. We have been doing this pretty consistently, and I'm very hopeful that this is going to happen, or if not just happen, but also unfold as we go forward. And we invite you to join us to develop more literature, more information, more description beyond what Ellen and her team has been doing tremendously well in terms of disseminating information about harmony. We believe that pushing this more into the scientific literature or into the body of scientific literature together with patient authors would be extremely important, because that's a lasting legacy. And so we invite you to join us if we ask you to join patient author or authoring groups in general. Like, for example, we have been proposing one about the description of the ethics framework for harmony and how anonymization and pseudonymization happen within harmony and harmony plus. This kind of legacy, this kind of trace or track record would be extremely important. So that's why we invite you to support us and to join us there as well. And that's it in terms of the official presentations and explanations, if you like. And now, if you have any questions or answer, sorry, we hopefully have answers, but if you have any questions or any comments, then now's the time to raise your hands or to type them into the questions and answers box. And I also look at the chat box now if there's anything from you that needs to be answered right away. As Ellen has already indicated in the chat box, indeed, these documents that were mentioned and or the reference materials that Ellen mentioned can be found and downloaded from the Harmony website. And this webinar and the slides will also be available there. Do you have any other questions or comments? And I stop sharing this slide. Go ahead if there's anything. I wait a couple more seconds.
There's one hand next to Jesus Hernandez.
Yep. Jesus, go ahead.
Hello, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations for the webinar. So I think it is really very, very important to have this type of webinars. Is really, really important. Well, I think it is more a comment, or maybe we can open some comment regarding this. So I think these are really important and very good suggestions coming from you all. And I want really to emphasize here that the Harmony project has been open to receive any kind of project or suggestion coming from the patient side from the beginning. Maybe we have been much more focused in the scientific projects because, well, because due to obvious reasons. So it is something that we are currently running in the hematological side. But I think it is really important to have your proposals, and that your proposal will be really totally welcome to the project. I also agree that the point in which you want or you would like to really collaborate with the running projects in the different diseases, it will be really also nice to have maybe some specific people. Let's say, with much more experience in lymphoma or myeloma or acute leukemia, to really be the touch point in these specific projects. Sometimes the projects are really running and it is quite difficult to share all the information with the different people, but be sure that even the scientists know the results at the time that they receive the abstract, that this is the same time that you also receive the abstract. So it's more or less the same, but this is really running. So this is one point regarding the, let's say, the much more scientific oriented projects. On the other hand, I think your proposal about anonymization procedures, de facto anonymization and all these stuffs would be also really important to know the position, the patient position, because it is really a very, very hot point now to be also discussed. So there is not only at scientific level or in scientific papers, the role of the patient has to be there, but also in the other, let's say, in the other publications, maybe not so close to the scientific journals. In any case, congratulations to you all, to Leucanet, that we are doing a really a very good, extremely good job in the Harmony and Harmony Plus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesus. Any other questions or comments? I can't see any other hands being raised. For the last, let's say 4 minutes, we do have a couple of, if you like, questions that we anticipated that that might come and happen. So we will ask these questions even if you don't ask them, because we think they are important to bring us forward. And one question that we usually get is, isn't it expensive to involve patients? Jan, what would you answer to that question? Is it expensive to involve patients?
Well, I would say it's more expensive not to involve patients, because out of what I presented earlier on in terms of also addressing the right questions and seeing probably protocol amendments that could have been avoided had we discussed about eligibility criteria and so on before, I think probably it is very efficient to involve patients, even though, of course, involvement of additional people costs some time. And that's why we feel sometimes that's the reason why it's not happening, because people feel, I'm already so busy, I already need to deal with industry or clinicians or whatever, so when shall I do that on top of things? I'm so busy. And that's why it might seem expensive. In terms of monetary expensive, I don't think this is expensive in comparison to what a clinical trial costs. Especially a larger trial, it's negligible what patient involvement costs. Nevertheless, of course, there needs to be a budget, because you need to have meetings, you need to compensate people when they're really doing a lot of work in a project, because nobody can actually do that for free. So it needs to be budgeted. But I think the word expensive, it is not expensive. It's expensive not to do it.
Thank you. In the meantime, we have some additional questions in the questions and answers box, so I will discuss those quickly. The first one is, what is your recommendation and advice to industry and academic teams who want to start engaging with patient organizations within Harmony? Write to us, send an email. Our email addresses are easily available, but I can also enter them into the chat box, and we are happy to carry it forward with you, and then see where that takes us. It depends obviously on the given hematologic malignancy, which patient organization it will be or should be, or maybe it's a more overarching issue, and then the patient cluster leadership, Jan, Eglis, myself, will take care of that. And Ellen has already entered the central communications address into the chat box, and I have entered my own. Now, Guillermo asks in the questions and answers box, what can we do in the Harmony Alliance to achieve a larger and more sound patient participation? My first take here would be just keep communicating, keep being transparent. And in some cases, this has worked very well, in some cases not, but it's maybe just a matter of time. All of this is still new, even if we are now in year 6, but it's still relatively new. Jan, what's your take?
Yeah, just to add to that, and you remember this one slide which I had with a triangle, so high impact on the left side, lower impact on the right side. And I think what can be done is really involve the named patient advocates that we have from each of the different hematological diseases and involve them by the time when you think about the research proposal, when you're designing what it could research on, what kind of data could be used to do that analysis, what kind of outcome sets could be defined and so on. At that time, actually, we can still influence and help. And if it just appears for approval later on, how much can we do? And we've had these conversations a couple of times. When we just see them, then we're saying, but you should include pro in that. And then we're more or less hearing, yeah, but the data set that we've identified doesn't do it, or we can't do it now. We really need to get approval that we can start. Otherwise, we don't get the research done by end of the project. Yeah, clear. If we need to change pathways at a too late stage, then it's too cumbersome. And that's why I can just call on everyone working on the hematological malignancies, whether it's from academia or industry, that we hear when something, when the seeds are being planted, that then patient involvement happens, and no, not when half of the tree is already there and we just need to think about who picks the fruits. That's just my call. And that's not a unique thing for Harmony. That's a thing that we often experience.
Thank you. And then there's another question from Natasha. Actually, she has 2 questions, but I will combine them, which is about the difficulty of identifying available data, especially related to PROs and quality of life, and also how can we be more effective in making a research proposal really possible. This has indeed been a hard nut to crack, but I think we've made good progress in some, not all, disease areas involved in Harmony. But I think we're moving forward there without being too specific or concrete here. I've sent you a message, Natasha, about an upcoming call where we want to discuss this together with you and also with others. But indeed, this has been rather difficult. So we keep pushing. That's what we can do. That PROs and quality of life data are included, if available, in the data sets that are handed over to Harmony. And if they are in the platform, if they are part of the data lake, then they should also be analyzed, and they should also be taken into account when the research proposals are being put together. And then a final question from Eglis. How do you suggest researchers can find patient organizations on their related diseases, considering that they might not know much about this inclusion system of the patient organizations in research and clinical trials? Speak to us. We've been doing this for many years. Not just in hematology, but also in other disease areas. We are happy to help you, to signpost you, to help you on, to tell you where the right patient organizations and where the right patient experts are. This is a recurrent issue, not just in these specific disease areas, but also everywhere. Not every disease is covered by a patient organization, and sometimes it's hard to find the right people to work with. But there's always knowledge and connections and an experience about that in the patient organizations involved in Harmony, so they can help you on in terms of how where to turn, who to write to, who to call. Am I right, Jan, or anything to add to that? Okay, nothing to add to that. Good. Let me see, as Guillermo suggests, that PROMs, PREMs, and quality of life data should be included in all our real-world data research. We couldn't agree more. That's right. Easier said than done. We've realized that as well. We keep pushing, but we fully agree, because that's the main interest also of patients involved in research, because that's what directly affects us all. With that, thank you very much for your time and for your attention.